Hello and welcome. My name is Kristen Hobby. I am a member of the Zendo Without Walls sangha that meets on a Wednesday evening, and I am a 2022 SAGE graduate for the Meditation and Mindfulness course. A couple of weeks ago, I shared a talk at the Thursday night Zendo Without Walls about curiosity and how it's been my spiritual practice, and people seem to like it. So someone asked if I could record it. So I'm recording it now, and it consists of about 6 little vignettes, little stories. So I'll share each story and pause between each one just to let you kind of let it drop. So about 15 years ago, a friend of mine was running a strength-based workshop, and I went along to support her. And it involves doing an online test, goes for about 15-20 minutes, and it produces a list of the top 24-25 strengths in order, that, from your top strength to your not so top strength. And I was really surprised with the results initially. My top strength came in as curiosity and interest in the world. Now, up until that point, I had never sort of thought about curiosity as being a strength. I just thought it was something, I don't know, normal or something I did. But the more I sat with it, and during the workshop we kind of workshopped it and played around with it, and I realized it actually made complete sense. It really did show me how I kind of tend to be in the world and tackle issues and invite experiences. So I'm going to begin with my first story, and it's my earliest memory, circa 1973. So let's begin at the very beginning. I am 2. Our home for the past 6 months has been a caravan. My father, who works for the railways, has a job travelling throughout my home state of Victoria in Australia to various country railway stations and filling in while the station master takes annual leave. From Meenian to Murchison, Dimboola to Ararat. My parents are young. They got married when Mum was 17 and Dad was 19. So in this picture, Mum is 20 and Dad 22. What a foolhardy thing to do, taking your young family and living in a caravan for months on end. My father was ambitious, and I'm sure he took this role to get ahead. My sister is about 6 months old. She is wearing a baby suit, perhaps white or soft yellow, and she is sitting in a bouncinette on the floor of the caravan. She looks so different to me. She's chubby with her full face and round cheeks. We have the same eyes though, a rich dark brown. Her hair is thick, dark and curly, the complete opposite to my fine blonde hair. I'm fascinated with her hair, the little curls that form around her face, the way you can pull a curl and it bounces right back. In this memory, I am playing with her hair. I pretend her hair is a farm, and I try and make little fences for the animals to stay in. There are fields for cows, chickens, ducks, and horses. Sometimes the caravan is parked in a caravan park where there are toilet blocks and laundries. I have my bath in a concrete laundry tub on a regular occasion. But sometimes there are no caravan parks, so we pull up wherever we can, near the station, in the backyard of the station master's house, or even in a paddock. As I reflect, I realise we probably didn't have water or electricity in these places. One evening we are woken up with a violent rocking of the caravan. I think that maybe there is a fierce storm or an earthquake. My dad looks out the window and identifies the cause of the commotion. There are several large bulls rubbing their heads against our van. One day as we were driving, a car hit the back of the caravan and caused the back window to smash in, leaving a million pieces of glass all over our beds. I can still see my mother trying to pick up the shards. I don't remember experiencing any fear, just a world that was big and there for the exploring. Every place we stopped had something interesting. Perhaps a river, a park, a football oval, a public swimming pool. It felt safe travelling with my parents and my baby sister. Story 2. The IQ test, circa 1983. When my sister was around 10 in grade 5 and I was 12 and in high school, my sister was given an IQ test. The school must have assessed Wendy as having a high IQ, and my parents must have given their permission. My sister did well and was told she was in the top 2% of the general population. Had the story finished there, I doubt I would have thought about it ever again. I wasn't tested, but my parents made the assessment that Wendy was the smart one. The story I told myself was that if she was the smart one, then I must be the dumb one. It was a really important moment for both of us. Wendy, upon hearing the news, decided that she didn't really need to try very hard at school. Things would come easily to her, and she didn't have to study very hard. That got her through to year 11, where she ended up failing and having to resit the year. For me, I reacted very differently. If I was not the smart one, then I would have to work even harder to prove to everybody I was smart. I became very self-motivated and worked really hard. This narrative became my story. I remember my dad saying one day, "Wendy's the smart one, but Kristen tries harder." Story 3. The Coles Story, circa 1985. When I was 14, I was working part-time in a local supermarket to save up for my exchange year in Switzerland, when I began to notice something odd. There were a few older girls from my high school who worked there. Every Thursday night, a couple of the teachers from my school came through their registers. There was Mr. Bulleid, who was a PE teacher with an enormous ego, and Mrs. Pollock, who worked in the school office. They would fill the trolleys up and then always go through Fiona's register, even when her line was the longest. I didn't think too much of it until one night I happened to be in the register behind her, and I watched as she scanned item from Mrs. Pollock's trolley. At the end of the huge order, Fiona said, "That will be $18.65. It was at least $150 or $180 order. What was going on? The following week I was behind her again and noticed that Mr. Bulleid grabbed a TV Week magazine just before Fiona began scanning the items. Fiona took the magazine, laid it across the scanner. She then continued to go through the motions of scanning with about 6 items to go, took off the magazine, scanned the last item properly. That will be $8.04. I was stunned. How could Fiona do that? And how could the teacher expect her to? I wasn't sure what to do. A few days later, after thinking about little else, I rang Tanya in the Human Resources office. I spoke to Tanya regularly about additional shifts. I think there might be some things happening that security might know about, I told her. What sort of things, she asked. Well, I think some of the girls are putting through the registers for friends and they're not doing it properly. How do you know this? I've seen it happen a few times. Do you think I should talk to security? I think that would be a good idea, she replied. The next afternoon, I found myself in a booth at the Red Balloon Cafe in the same shopping centre as the supermarket, waiting for the security team to turn up. I was so nervous, convinced somebody from my school would see me. 2 people arrived that I recognised from the store. They were always around, pretending to shop, but really looking out for shoplifters. Just tell us what you saw, Kristen. I explained everything. Okay, thanks for letting us know. We'll take it from here. I think you should go first. I'll follow in a few minutes, I said nervously. They left and I felt sick. What had I done? After 5 minutes or so, I left and walked home. The next morning before school, I met my friend Rachel and told her what happened. She didn't say much. Suddenly, Mick Hurry, the school buffhead, walked past me. I've heard you've been dobbing on the girlies. I still remember his exact words. So dobbing is an Australian term for telling on somebody, ratting on somebody. It can be a verb, as in to dob, or it can be a noun, a dobber. No, I haven't, I replied as I couldn't think of anything else to say. Oh God, I thought to myself, if Mick Hurry knows, then the whole school knows. What have I done? Rachel offered no sympathy. You shouldn't have done it. Well, I know that now, but what am I going to do? I wanted to go home, but the bell had rung and class was about to start. I stayed enduring nasty glances from everyone, it seemed. As soon as I got home, I called Tanya in HR. Tanya, everyone knows that I spoke to security. I thought you would keep it quiet. Oh, well, I didn't say anything, she responded. I slumped to the floor, feeling nauseous. The next day, I heard that 4 girls had been caught and fired from one store and another 3 from a nearby branch. Somehow that didn't make me feel better. It didn't get easier at school. Word spread that I caused 7 girls to be fired. I was persona non grata. Could my life get any worse? I carried this guilt and shame around with me for years. It was like a dirty secret. I couldn't tell anybody. In a country where being seen as a dobber was akin to killing your firstborn, I had crossed a line that no one ever should. For some people, they have secrets of illicit affairs, stealing money from work or gambling away their life savings. My secret was that I dobbed. It's 2019 and I'm attending the Spiritual Directors International Conference in St. Louis. My friend Diane Millis has asked me to co-host a day-long workshop on narrative and storytelling. After the lunch break, Diane invites me to tell this Coles story to a group of around 22 people. We sit in a circle and I'm given the microphone. I tell this story again some 35 years later. The memories are still vivid in my mind. I'm 14 again and I feel my hands shake as I tell the dobbing story for the first time in decades. They're mostly Americans in the audience, so I have to explain what the term checkout chick, cash register operator is and what dobbing means. I expect we're going to move on to the next activity when I finish telling my story, but instead Diane invites some silence and then asks anyone if they want to respond using the phrases, I wonder, I notice, or I appreciate. I notice what an incredibly brave thing it was for a 14-year-old to speak truth to power in this way. You must have had some courage, someone tells me. I'm dumbstruck. Brave? Courageous? I had never considered this possibility, never framed it in this way. I wonder how your parents reacted, another asked. I'm sure I told them, but I don't ever remember feeling particularly supported from them or the supermarket management or my supervisors. I felt it was the loneliest thing in the world to do, I responded. I wonder, a woman asked, would you do it again? Would you still dob if you were given the chance again? There is something in the softness of her question that showed me the compassion she had for me and my younger self that touched me deeply. It's a really good question, and not one I had ever considered before. I paused for a moment. Yes, I would. I wouldn't change a thing, I responded, and I meant it. Story 4. Switzerland. In 1986, it was a bitterly cold day as we all shuffled into the main hall for the school assembly. I took a seat next to Rachel as the principal began trying to quiet the hall. The school had over 1,000 students from a wide range of backgrounds. In our Year 8 class of 26, only 6 of us were second-generation Australians. The class was filled with students from Italy, Greece, Turkey, Vietnam, England and Germany. Okay, can I get everyone's attention, Mr. Powers said. Today we have something special for you. Holly Stevens is going to talk to you today. You may have noticed Holly around the school. She's come all the way from Michigan in the US to spend a day a year with us here at Kimura High with a program called Youth for Understanding. Why a few? Please welcome Holly. There was polite applause as Holly made her way to the stage. She was tall, with long blonde hair and bright green eyes. She looked nervous. She began by telling us about her experience of leaving her hometown in Michigan, coming here to stay with a host family and experience life in Australia for a year. She spoke about her difficulty in understanding Australian slang, the mystery that is Australian rules football, How can they play with no helmets? And the fun of seeing real kangaroos and koalas. I sat transfixed as she spoke. I had never heard about an exchange program, and in that moment, I decided that that was what I was going to do. Thinking back to that moment, I can see why it was such an attractive idea. My home and school life weren't great. The constant bullying at school was getting me down. That afternoon, I rang Youth for Understanding for an application form. I really wanted to learn French properly, and it looked like the best option was French-speaking Switzerland. I don't recall even asking my parents. I just went ahead and replied. A year later, July 1987. I often see my life divided into two, before Switzerland and after Switzerland. It was such a transforming experience. I went from a very dysfunctional home life to a family that genuinely cared for each other. I had 3 host siblings, Chantal, who was my age, and 2 weeks after I arrived, she headed to Lubbock, Texas for her own exchange year. And 2 brothers, Nicholas and Dominic, both a few years younger than me. The family had enrolled their children in the local Rudolf Steiner school and lived largely within that philosophy. We had no TV in the house. The only newspapers that were delivered were the local ones, and there was virtually no brands on clothes or items around the house. We all ate dinner together each night and shared about our day. I experienced such a different life here. We lived in a small village that had a train service and a bus to the nearby town of Morges, which we would then take a bigger train to Lausanne for school every day. There was a 20-minute walk from the bus stop or train station to the house, which sat within about 10 others on a small rise. I would depart the train, walk through the town, passing a fountain with 1797 engraved on it, which always astounded me because that was older than Australia, really, and continue to the edge of town where there was a small dirt track which led to the house. Our house was the second from the end. I'd always believed in God, though we'd never been part of a church. I'd already dismissed Catholicism after hearing my aunt speak about the emphasis on sin and guilt they experienced growing up. Then what did I believe in? I guess for me it was simple. There was a God, maybe in the sky, who loved me and wanted the best for me. It seemed to be different to the God that was portrayed to me through the church. So I decided I would be my own church, population 1, God as companion. There had been times when I prayed and found that helpful. I had no reason to doubt his or her existence. On my walk home, I would often use the time walking on the dirt track to chat to God. In English, then later in French, if I felt like it. I would chat about my day, ask for any guidance. It felt good, like a private little chat. Throughout my life, I'd always sought out these moments of contemplation and prayer. In Singapore, I would regularly walk around the Kallang River near our apartment, and I soon found a God bench where I would pause, have a conversation, pray, or meditate. The year in Switzerland was hard. I arrived knowing barely any French, and 2 weeks later was attending high school. There were the outer realities of learning a new language, fitting into a new family, a new school, a new country. But just as importantly, what was happening internally. Who was I if I was not living in the suburbs of Melbourne? Who was I in a new family, one that behaved so differently to mine? What did I believe in? What did I hold dear? What were my non-negotiables? I didn't have my culture around me, and I realized I was free to choose who I wanted to be. That curiosity took me deeper into myself. Story 5, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, 2019. At the 2019 Spiritual Directors International Conference in Bellevue, Washington, the first keynote was by Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. She was softly spoken, but her words were powerful. She challenged us to go out into the world and meet the other, so that we can fully learn about ourselves through their lens. People who are different to you, people you've been told to stay away from. She asked what we were being called into, inviting us into a real and radical whole knowing of who we are to help our yearning to belong to each other. We can only come to learn about ourselves and belong to each other in deep relationship with each other. She challenged the notion of social justice adding that when justice is meted out by one group to another group, we are all forsaken. Rather, we should be committed to liberation for all. We don't have all the answers, just a willingness to sit in the place of not knowing. So something happened as I listened to Reverend Angel's address. This idea of not knowing being the starting point of our letting go of ourselves, the boxes we and others put ourselves in, and perhaps being open to the other as a way to learn about ourselves, it resonated deeply. What if, I thought, this whole IQ test was not about Wendy being declared smarter than me, but rather a gift from my parents for me to begin in a place of not knowing, an invitation to go out into the world to discover myself. Wendy knew she was intelligent, so she didn't need to go out into the world to discover. But now that I look at my life, I see that this has been a driven path to meet the other. Exchange students, host families, countries, cities, spiritual director, international conferences, taxi drivers, shopkeepers, stall holders, and in each encounter I get to know myself a little better. My dad's view of the world was that there was not enough to go around. If I got something, a work trip overseas, a promotion, an award, then somehow that meant he couldn't get those things. If Wendy was smart, then I couldn't be as intelligent, as if it was a finite resource spread across the family. And what do I discover as I venture out into the world encountering other? Enough of everything, enough love, enough compassion, grace, certainly enough intelligence. So I discard my father's notions of limits and scarcity and declare that I am smart enough, certainly intelligent enough to do whatever I want to do. Story 6, the final story, 2026. A Goshuan? What's a Goshuan? A week before we left for Japan, I was watching some YouTube videos of people exploring some of the cities we were going to visit. You know the ones, top 10 things to buy at a Japanese 7-Eleven, top 10 things to do in Tokyo. I came across a video about collecting Goshuans. It turns out that most of the Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples in Japan have someone who offers a Goshuan. It translates to Honourable Red Seal, and it's a combination of one or more stamps, along with calligraphy with the name or special feature of that particular place. Most Shinto shrines have a connection with nature, so the shrine may be known for its symbol of an animal like a fox or an owl, tree or a fruit. I was intrigued. I discovered that the shrines and temples prefer it if you have separate books, so one for the shrines, one for the temples, or Goshuanchos as they are known. I jumped onto Amazon and had one delivered before we left. I chose a small A5 size book with a wooden cover depicting sakura or cherry blossoms. Inside the Goshuancho is a concertina of around 20 blank pages. I immediately began researching where I could collect Goshuans in each of the towns we were visiting. I thought it would be fun to collect one from a shrine and one from a temple in each place. On our first morning in Tokyo, I took my brand new book to a Shinto shrine not far from the hotel and practiced my Japanese. Goshuan onigashimasu. The protocol is to first enter the temple or shrine, pay your respects, wash your hands in the water tub, and then find the Goshuan office. These are not normally marked, but became more obvious as I visited more and more. Normally they would have a sliding glass window and some examples of the Goshuans on offer, and sometimes you got to choose which ones you wanted. I arrived at the He shrine in Asakusa and found the Goshuan office on the left-hand side of the main shrine. I was practicing the phrase as I walked up to the office, carefully handed over my Goshuancho with both hands, while saying my much-rehearsed phrase. She took the book, flipped it over. I have to say, I would rarely get this right, as we read our books from right to left, as opposed to the left to the right of the Japanese books. She opened the book and said to me, "New?" "Yes," I replied. She handed me a token with a number 35 on it. I walked away to wait for the Goshuan to be ready, quickly working out that what 35 was in Japanese, sango, so I would be ready. Beside me was a large gallery of wooden prayer plaques, each with a written prayer in many languages. "Sango," the voice rang out. I hurried up with my 500 yen coin, ready to exchange it for my first goshuin. I handed it over and bowed. Arigatou gozaimasu. She handed me the book. I opened it up and stared at my first goshuin. I loved it. Could there be anything more perfect for me? Calligraphy, stamps, a beautiful book in a sacred place. Therein started a very fun search for goshuins around Japan. I didn't quite manage 2 in each location, and I completely missed Osaka because I missed the opening hours of the shrine by minutes. But this search led me to quiet streets, suburban areas, and train trips to find them. We headed off on our 14-day cruise around Japan with goshuin maps in each port. In Hiroshima, Andrew went on a shore excursion to the Peace Museum, and I was booked in on an excursion to a calligraphy brush factory. Unfortunately, my tour was cancelled a few days before. Not to be deterred, I planned out a morning of goshuin collecting and stationery shopping on my own. I took the free shuttle bus into the Peace Park and asked one of the guides if they could direct me to a taxi stand. One of the guides accompanied me all the way to the taxi stand, a distance of about 1 kilometre or half a mile. I asked her to check with the driver the location of Mitataki-dera temple and that he accepted credit cards. My driver nodded and off we set. He didn't speak much English. If you've never been inside a Japanese taxi, let me explain. They are meticulous. The back seats are covered in a comfortable mat. The centre console often has a lace doily across it with a small plastic tray where you place the money. The driver wears a suit, a hat, and white gloves. I could tell the journey would take about 30 minutes from Google Maps, so I sat back and enjoyed the scenery. The city began to thin out, the road began to narrow and became quite windy. We began to climb and it became more and more remote. As we neared the temple, I did begin to wonder how I would possibly get back. The driver asked me something in Japanese, and when he realised I didn't understand, he said, "Come back." He wanted to know if he should wait for me. I said no, as I wasn't sure how long I would be. I imagined perhaps sitting in a soft dappled sunlight and meditating. I left the taxi and started to wander up the stone path. The setting was beautiful. I started to look for the goshuin office, but couldn't find anything. There was a small tea house, but that was closed. I came across a huge bell in the centre of the path. I continued up. There were beautifully manicured Japanese gardens, a small stream, a pagoda, and then finally a small office to the side. I went up with my Buddhist book and asked for a goshuin. I was the only person around and she did it in front of me. I loved seeing the care she put into setting the stamps in the exact location and then watching her sweeping brush strokes as the black ink formed letters on the page. She placed a small piece of tissue paper on the page to stop it from smudging and then offered me an origami box she had folded. I thanked her and took my book. I headed down the path, stopping for a moment in the wooden pagoda, which had seats for meditation. I sat in the sunshine for a few minutes when I started to hear the unmistakable sound of a tour group. The quiet had been broken, so I continued walking down the path, and my thoughts began to turn to how I was going to get back to town. There were no buses, and even though I had the Uber app, I didn't think a cab would come all the way out here. As I got nearer the front gate, I thought maybe I'll just start walking down the road and see what I can find. As I left the temple gates, I looked across to my left and there was a parking lot. There were 2 vans and a taxi. I thought, I wonder if it's free. As I approached the taxi, I could see it was the same taxi driver who'd brought me up. He'd waited for me. I was so happy to see him. Arigatou gozaimasu, I repeated. Peace Park? He asked me, thinking I might like to return to the place he picked me up. No, Kokoku Shrine kudasai. I'm collecting goshuins, and I showed him the seal I had just received. Goshuin, he smiled broadly. We stopped at a traffic light not long into the trip, and he pulled down a clipboard he'd kept under the sun visor. He looked at the sheet on top and said to me, "Silver Sea?" Yes, the sheet had a list of all the cruise ships in town for that day. Somehow we got onto the topic of food, because I speak food in every language, and so we talked about ramen and tempura and okonomiyaki in our limited shared words. When we arrived at the shrine, he said, "Come back?" No, arigato. I will walk, because I could see the city across the river. We smiled at each other and went on with our lives, but the shared morning left me smiling and touched. So I invite you to think about how curiosity may have shown up in your life. What are the moments in my stories that perhaps resonated with you, perhaps didn't resonate? What's coming up for you? Let's invite you to take a few moments, perhaps journal if you have the time, and just explore how these stories may have touched you. Thank you very much. If you've got to here, I'm very grateful that you listened to all of my stories, and I hope you enjoyed them. Thanks so much.